Good evening, everybody. Thank you all for coming. Hi, Karen. Before we start, please turn your cell phones off or put them on vibrate if you could, please. Thank you. First on our agenda is standing for the pledge to the flag, and then remain standing for a moment of silence for our first responders and our military personnel. Thank you. Please be seated. Next on the agenda is the reading of our minutes from our last meeting, which was at Everglades Rec Center by our Secretary, Reb Benson. Stand behind the blue line.
We got the blue line for it. Thanks, Cliff. Good evening, everybody. All right, we'll just try and cover some of the highlights from the meeting. We don't try and cover everything that we discussed there. So what I want to just sort of bring up a little bit is we go through a period where we go through the Treasurer's report and that. You'll get some other information from that for current time, so we'll skip over that. We'll do some announcements. Most of the announcements are ones you'll probably hear again tonight, so I'm going to skip over that part too. Had one of our residents asked, or made a few points really about the live streaming and the video, and was appreciative of that, and hope to see that in a lot of different kinds of meetings, not just POA meetings and whatnot. And talked a little bit about the Independent Fire District and supported that, but obviously have to see where it all goes as far as ambulances and things like that too. Another resident suggested that you'll hear a little bit more about it, but the Vials of Life program, that one thing you might want to do is put your pet information on there, so that if they can't talk to you and there's a pet there, they might know what to do with the pet. Thought that was a pretty good idea, which isn't on the sheet that talks about the Vial of Life program. Then we had Gary Cato was our speaker, who talked about Project SOS, which is Support Our Soldiers. So some of the key points of what he brought up there, which some of those key points, of course, are in the bulletin, but just bring it back up here again a little bit, is that the program started in 2010, basically based on a conversation he had with his son in Iraq, and providing medical supplies to troops in Iraq and then Afghanistan, and then helping medically the children injured in those two countries. The Villages Regional Hospital was instrumental in the starting of this program, where they initially provided 5 boxes of material that was sent postage-free from the USPS to the 528th Medical Unit in Iraq. It then grew, the program grew, where an Air Force contract was put in place and provided the supplies to MacDill Air Force Base, and then the Air Force and the military got those overseas to 23 forward operating bases, hospitals, when it was all done. The effort was then shut down after 3 years because the Taliban started targeting the military, getting the supplies where they needed to in the local communities. At that point, they switched efforts for this SOS to the local veterans support, and that's been going on for the last 8 years. And that support has been mainly for the homeless veterans in Ocala Forest. There's about 150,000 veterans are homeless nationwide, and about 1/3 of them reside here in Florida, especially during January and February. And there's 1,200 veterans that are in the Ocala Forest right now. The Ocala Forest supports, the program they support in Ocala Forest has a 5-step effort that they did for the veterans. First was health. They provided a clean water capability, then medical and dental care. Then they did finances. A lot of the vets were not getting their veterans benefits, so they worked to make sure they could get their benefits. So over 650 veterans started receiving that were in the forest. Then they worked with jobs. T&D Pool and Spas was the first to help out, trying to get the veterans a job to earn some money that way. And then some other businesses kicked in after that. And then housing. Worked with the Housing and Urban Development to find affordable housing for some of the veterans. And the last program was the children's. They've provided 81 scholarships so far to date through working with Take Stock and Children's Organization Program, which provides 2 years of free college to any of the kids that get signed up to that program. And there's a lot they got to do to be able to earn that. COVID caused a huge setback in 2020. They're now distributing food every Saturday morning, about 20,000 to 25,000 pounds of food to over 2,000 families and 350 children under 12. so it's about a week's worth of food. Almost all the veterans groups in the villages provide support, mainly monetary for scholarships, sponsor a child, etc. And if he mentioned that if anyone's interested in being involved, please contact him. And that information, if it wasn't in the bulletin, will be in the bulletin here coming up. And that was basically about where we had it, and then we adjourned the meeting.
Thank you, Reb. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes? Second? Somebody?
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. All opposed? Okay, our treasurer's not here tonight, but our Vice President, Jerry Felici, who used to be our treasurer, is now going to do the report to the best of his ability. It's been a long time since he had to do this.
All right. So I'll do my best acting job as treasurer. Oh, by the blue line. I like blue. It's a good color. The receipts for the month of October were $2,720. I'm going to eliminate the pennies. The expenses were $16,029. So we had a loss of $13,309 for the month of October. And for the 10 months ending October 31st, we have a cumulative loss of $26,634. Not too unusual for the past couple years during the pandemic, but we still have November and December, which are typically good months for dues collections. We do still have in the bank, in our operating fund, we have $114,402. So we're still okay, and we're able to continue to carry on. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Jer. Next is, it's the end of the year, so now it's time for our nomination of our officers and board members for next year. Len Hathaway is going to do it as he has for the last 8 or 9 or 10 years. So would all the officers and board members please come to the front? Reb, Karen, I think it was
Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'll be introducing the slate of officers, then I'll be asking for two motions, one to close nominations and the other one to vote on the slate of officers. So the positions for 2022 for the officers and board are Cliff Weiner, President, Jerry Felici, Vice President from Point Siena, Treasurer Donna Kemper, Secretary Reb Benson from Del Mar, Directors Sal Torname for St. James, Andrew Curtis from Caroline, Dan Warren from Gilchrist, Tita Dumagasa from Finney, and Karen Lambert from Point Siena. Are there any nominations from the floor? Seeing none, entertain a motion to close. The motion has been moved, and any seconded? All in favor to close nominations signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Thank you. Okay, now on the motion, I need a motion to elect these candidates that we just announced. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Thank you. And the induction of the officers will be a month from today at the December meeting. Please join with me in thanking all of these folks for volunteering on our behalf.
Thanks, Len. And thank you, guys. And by the way, anybody that wants my job, please raise your hand. I'm more than willing to let you have it. Something I started to do, I don't know, 2 or 3 months ago, because I think it's important, is any of the people who help run this fine community, I introduce them and stand. So first of all, I got, I believe, 3, unless he left. Did Orrin leave? Okay, so Orrin Miller, Commissioner, Sumter County, stand up, Orrin. Craig Estep, Gary Search, guys, please stand. Those are 3 of your 5 Sumter County Commissioners. Now, representing the boards, we have Mark Hayes, who's on District 4's board. Please don't let me forget Andrew Bilandaro, who's on District 12. Reed Panis, who's on District 5. Anything else? Sal Torme on District 8. Jerry Felici on District 5, Andrew Curtis on District 6, and I happen to be on District 4 also. So just some of the people that represent you in different groups. I'm not done. And then now, I saved this for last. Last night at the Lady Lake Commission meeting, which I attended, they introduced or nominated my good friend Jim Wright, stand up Jim, as mayor of Lady Lake. So he's the new mayor of Lady Lake. And just on the side, he also is my IT guy. So he serves a double purpose. Thank you, Jim. Good luck in your coming endeavors. You'll need it. Okay, our next shredding event is going to be on April 9th, 2022 at the Wildwood Community Center, 9 to 12, members only. You need a ticket. We will have the information in the December bulletin that's coming out, so you can apply and get a ticket if you're a member. And I'm asking something special this year. As Reb said when he read the minutes last month, our speaker was Gary Cato, SOS, Support Our Soldiers. I don't believe any veteran should have to live in the Ocala National Forest. So what I'm asking, it's a free event for our members. We usually have 1,100 people that give us 45,000 pounds of paper that we shred. I'm asking you to, if you would, to bring a gift card so we can give it to SOS so they can buy food and clothes for those people and help them. It's not mandatory, but it would be greatly appreciated. There'll be more about that in the bulletin too. Just for your information, I know I keep saying I have to stand here. We live stream our meetings now. We have for the last 5 months, I believe. Is that right, Mike? 5 months? Okay, in the last 5 months, the least amount of people that have watched our meeting live stream is 327. The most is 1,700. So it's kind of nice. There's not a lot of people here tonight, but hopefully there'll be a lot of people watching it the next day or two. It's on our Facebook page, POA at the Villages. You can go on it. If you can't come to the meeting, you can see it. And we also posted, our meetings are on Tuesday, we also posted on our website on Wednesdays or Thursdays. It's usually on Wednesdays. So you can go on our website and watch it also. So just another way to see what's going on and getting the information. You guys are probably tired of hearing me say this and talk about this, the vial of life. I think everybody in the Villages should have one. What this is, Sumter County Sheriff's Department has started this program, and I also see that now Wildwood has got the same thing. So it's kind of important. What you do is you take this sheet, there's 2 pages to it. Second page is you fill out with your medical information. You take one of the green stickers and put it on your front door. You put the other one on your refrigerator. You put the information into this vial, and I will tell you, when the Public Safety Department comes, you're going to save precious, precious seconds, which is really important. I have vowed to do this until every refrigerator in the Villages has one, so I got a long way to go. We have some on the back table. Feel free to take 1, 2, as many as you need. Give them to your neighbors. It's really, believe me, if you need it, you're going to be thankful you did it. Just another one of them great things. Another thing, Jennifer, make sure they know I said this. Please sign up for e-notification. It's probably one of the best things the Villages has done. You get more information than you're ever going to want. You'll know everything that's going on here. You can pick and choose what you want to be notified on, and it's really, really important, especially during hurricane season, because you'll know exactly what's happening at all times. You can go to the District Gov website, sign up for it. Tina, did you want to say anything about volunteers? I know I didn't say anything to you, but I like to surprise you.
Can I whisper something? Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to our meeting tonight. I am the Director of Volunteers for the POA, and in that capacity, it is my role to try and seek volunteers for the POA. As probably you have guessed, the POA is an organization run by volunteers, and we have many tasks that probably is not obvious to you when you attend these meetings. But behind the scenes, there's a lot of things to do. And we would really appreciate your help. You came to the villages probably from a life or a career where you had shown and gained skills that probably you're not aware of that could be useful to the POA. But I would like, most especially, if you have the skills, the time, and the talent to consider becoming a member of the board of directors of the POA. We do need people such as those who are seated here tonight who can help further the cause of protecting the rights of the villagers when there are issues that affect us in our daily lives and in the properties that we have. So if you think you have the talent and especially the time, please let us know. My name again is Tita Dumagsa, and my telephone number is always in the bulletin under the board of directors. So please contact me, and if you have other skills, especially if it's related to computer skills, let us know as well. But the most basic thing is that you have the time and the willingness to volunteer, and we would appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tita, for the great job you do. In the back of the room at the tables, we have some of our good friends. We have people back there from Florida Native Plant Society, Realty Execs, Shine, the Villages Hospital Auxiliary, the Villages Shrine Club, and Seniors versus Crime. Let me say something about Seniors versus Crime. The gentleman who used to do that at every one of these meetings for many, many years was named Brian Lipsky. He was a District 2 supervisor. He was a good friend of the POAs, and he passed away last month. I am telling you that next month, in December, we are going to induct Brian into the POA Hall of Fame. So if any of you are interested, people from Shine, or Seniors versus Crime, let your people know. It's an honor that's well deserved. Believe me, he did a lot of good for a lot of residents here in many different ways. Speakers for your social groups. POA does a couple of presentations. One's on some of the issues that might be happening in the villages now, and some of them are to help you get started with the Helping Neighbor AED program, which Sal and I do. If you're interested in having a speaker for one of your social groups, please call me, send me an email. We can set up a time. I have one tomorrow, I have one Thursday. So we're more than welcome to do it, more than willing to do it, and hope you guys will take advantage of it. You'll learn some really good things. Okay, now it's time for our cash raffle. We give away 3 $30 prizes. First number, 9747, last 4 numbers. 9747. If nobody claims, it goes to the president. I've been doing this now for 7 years, I've yet to get one. Oh, Dan got it, okay. Did he have it? Well, he can read too. 98, I knew I liked him. 9804. put it for the veterans? Most assuredly. Thank you very much. I will give it to Gary myself. Thank you. Thank you very much. 9808. All the way in the back. Maddie. Okay. So just for your information, next month.
This young lady would like to also give it to the veterans.
Okay, well, I know her husband's a veteran after 30-some years, so. Okay, thank you, Maddie. Thank you, David. Wow, that's awesome. Thank you, guys. Our speaker next month is someone from the Department of Consumer Affairs. Lenore, help me, Sal. Spence, thank you. Who's going to talk about scams. In January, our speaker is going to be Dick Campbell from the Hospital Auxiliary. In February, it's going to be Angie Fox, who happens to be the wife of one of the Sumter County supervisors, who's going to talk about some of the issues with the Sumter County shelter, I believe. In March, it's going to be the hospital. Cheryl Chestnut, the new clinical, what's her title, Jerry? Clinical Director of Clinical something. I don't read. They change the title all the time. Jerry and I and Sal had a meeting with her last week. We're pretty impressed. She's going to come, and I don't think she's going to be pulling any punches. And in April, it's going to be Dr. Norman Anderson from Rebozo Oncology Clinic. So with that being said, now it's time for our public forum. I'll try and answer any questions you might have. If we don't have an answer, we'll get one and let you know what it is. So if you have a question, please raise your hand. Jerry and Sal will come to you. Wow.
They all know the answers.
That's awesome. It's only the second or third time that's happened in all the years that I've been here. So, okay. So now it's time for our speaker. So, you know, it's my fault too. I apologize. I didn't even get your name, hon. Deanie Connors. So she's going to talk about Florida-friendly landscaping, which is really an issue that's really kind of, it's really kind of important. I know I get lots of phone calls, and I'm sure
You can take that off if you want.
decompliance gets a lot.
Because I'd rather
It's a
speak
thing
back
that's not
here.
really understood here very well. So hopefully she can shed some light on it.
Can
So
I speak back here?
I'm not in charge of that. Could she stand over? Yeah, you're good there.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. Can y'all see that? Oh, there you go. Thank you. My name is Deanie Connor, and I am a Florida Master Naturalist and Master Gardener, but I'm speaking tonight on behalf of the Florida Native Plant Society, and we do have a chapter here in the villages, and we are located in the back right there. Okay, next. Next. So, how many of you are, anybody here from Florida, like a native? Yay. Well, I'm not quite a native. I'm almost. I've lived most of my life in Florida. But I think if I went to another state and tried to garden, I would have a lot of questions. And I have seen over the years a lot of things happen to Florida. So it's very dear to me to try to preserve Florida. We all love it. We love the recreation that we have. We love the beautiful weather. And you come to the villages and we have beautiful homes and beautiful landscapes. But we at the Florida Native Plant Society are trying to show people that there's a lot of beautiful plants from Florida that grow very well here in Florida. And they kind of defined a place. You know, everyone thinks of Florida as palm trees, and we do have palm trees, but we also have a lot of palm trees that aren't from this area and that grow here. But our native plants have evolved with the flora and fauna that is here in Florida. And as you can see here, we have hummingbirds and birds, and they eat the plants, and we have insects, beautiful butterflies, but they need the plants that are indigenous to this area. Okay, next. Now, the University of Florida has come up with a system of 9 principles to use to help you with your Florida landscaping. And these principles can save our Florida, but it also saves you time, money, energy, a lot of things. So they're very good principles. And if you're interested in finding out about these 9 principles, there's a monthly talk on this done by the county extension. It's the Wiser Lawn and Landscape for New Residents, and it's Florida-friendly landscaping. And they would go into depth to these 9 principles. I'm not going to do that tonight. I'm going to touch on a few of them. But if you're interested, it's usually the 2nd Tuesday of the month, and it's at a couple different locations. Okay, next. Florida is actually quite a large state, and we're divided into different zones of that plants survive well in. As you can see, in the northern part, we have climate zones in the 8s, and then we're in the middle of the states with the 9s, and then lower you actually get into tropical. We would be considered subtropical, but down here is actual tropical. And the villages fall mostly in 9A. Now, there's a little bit that possibly could be considered 9B. Right here I have an example of 2 things that we find a lot in the villages, rubellini palms and queen palms. And we're actually not in their thriving zone. So they're actually considered cold hardy to 10A and 9B respectively. So if we get freezes, which we do sometimes, I know the first year I was here was 2017, 2018, we had like 5 freezes. I live in the northern part of the villages, and it can harm these palms. It might not kill them, but it might damage them enough that later on you might have problems with them. So you're going to see a lot of plants here that I was surprised to see because we're a little cold for these particular plants. So it's very important to know what zone you're in. So remember that you are in 9A here in the villages. Okay, next. It's also important to know what you have in your landscape. Now, most of us have basically sun, but you might have some part sun, which means that you have maybe 3 to 6 hours of sun a day, or you might have some shade. I do have a part under some palm trees that's very shady in my yard. And also, you might have different zones in your yard. Some are drier. I know a lot of people in the villages between the houses sometimes is where the water tends to settle, and those areas are more wet. And plants need different light situations. They need sunny, some are partial sun, and some actually need shade to grow in. Because leaves are solar collectors, and some leaves can be quite sensitive to the sun. If any of you grow any orchids, you know that you can't really have those in full sun. They actually do need some shade. Okay, next. So it's very important for the first principle of the 9 principles is to put the right plant in the right place. And that also means that you have the plant in the right wetness zone, the right sun zone, but also that your soil is good. Someone tonight asked me about getting their soil tested, and you can get it tested through the University of Florida. You can pick up the little bags and the paperwork to get that done at any of our plant clinics, which are on Mondays and Fridays. That's the Sumter County Master Gardener plant clinics. So your soil is important, and also what you pick and where you place it is very important. So right plant in the right place. Now here's an example of some Washingtonian palms. Some people call them Mexican fan palms. And these look okay. You know, here's the roof of the house. They might be a little close to the house. But these palms can grow 5 feet a year. And that's a lot. So they can actually get quite tall in a matter of a few years. And they're really not designed. We have them in the villages, but they're really not designed to be in your personal home landscape. They get way too tall. And I know personally, because we had some in our yard, and they can cause a lot of problems. So you want to make sure that you're putting the right plant in the right place. Okay, next. Another important part is mulch. What kind of mulch you use. Now, I live in a courtyard villa, and when we moved in, it was nothing but rocks. I don't know how this occurred here in Florida, but we really do have natural stones and rocks in Florida, but to have your whole lawn or landscape, which you can do in the courtyard villa, you can't do that in the rest of the villages, but to have it all rocks is quite something. We actually removed them, and that was quite expensive. But mulch is a good thing. And if you use a natural mulch, you're going to be adding to your soil in a very positive way. You can reduce weeds by using mulch, but you're still going to get weeds. This is Florida, and everything grows very fast, and it's a great place to have a lot of weeds. It also gives a nice appearance, and it does moderate the soil temperature. However, stones, rubber mulch, and cypress mulch are not recommended. Now, cypress mulch is natural, and it certainly meets the other criteria. However, you don't know the source of that cypress mulch, and cypress mulch trees are very slow growing, and they have become quite threatened in Florida. It used to be that you would drive down the highway and you would see on roadsides big clocks made out of cypress or big cypress knees that people had lacquered and they sold to people. That's no longer legal to do because cypress trees are a precious commodity and they're very slow growing. Stones. Stones are going to do nothing for the soil except heat it up. Now, I do see a lot of yards that have stones in them and for their mulch. And I don't know exactly how they do it because I was never able to grow anything very well in the stones. But the stones are going to make the ground warmer. They're going to burn the roots of the plant. So they're really not recommended as mulch. Nor is rubber mulch because rubber mulch can possibly leak some chemicals into the soil. But pine straw, pine bark nuggets, melaleuca is a plant that they planted into the Everglades to suck up the water. And it did a great job, but they found out that wasn't a good thing for the Everglades. So they're now cutting those down and making mulch out of them. So that's a really good option, and it's also good because it doesn't harbor bugs. And by the way, mulch is not a haven for bugs. I think some people believe that it is, but that's not really true. Okay, next. You also need to allow enough room for the plants that you plant. And I have made this mistake myself. I planted way too many plants. I live in a courtyard villa, and they're a little bit crowded now. Now, there's a couple publications. This particular one is free to residents of Sumter County. You can order it. We also have some at that Florida-friendly landscaping program, and you can get it online, too. And it's very good. It has where you should plant certain plants, how big they'll get, the conditions they need, how much water, how much sun they need. It's a wonderful book. But if you notice, I have a little marker here. Sometimes, since this book was published, they have found that some of these plants that they put in here have now been listed as invasive, and we're going to talk about invasive in a minute. But this is a very good guide. Now, right here in the back, we have this guide, which these are all native plants, and it will show you where, if they grow well in sun, shade, or in part sun. And this is free. We have it in the back there. It's a very nice guide to give you an idea of some of the beautiful plants that are native to Florida. Next. So why do some new plantings die? We get this question all the time at the plant clinics, and the number one answer I can tell you is they weren't taken care of. Anytime you plant something new, whether it's small or a larger plant, you have to baby it. It needs water. It needs care. Now, it doesn't necessarily need fertilizer because plants actually need to have their roots developed before they can take in the fertilizer. But you really need to take care of new plants. Next slide. So one of the myths that circulates about Florida-friendly and Florida-native landscaping is you can just plant it and forget it. And that's really not true. Like I said, plants need to be babied when they're first planted, and they need water. And once they're established, native plants do very well because they're meant to be here. And if they are in the right place and they're the right plant, then they do very well. Now, other plants that you do plant that aren't native should do well also once they're established. Another thing that I hear a lot is we don't want to plant native plants because it looks wild, it doesn't look good. Here's some examples of some yards that are planted native, and these look very nice. They look just very similar to most of the landscapes that we have here in the villages. So they're attractive and they're very low maintenance. We spend so much money on fertilizers and pesticides and mowing, and you could far reduce that if you planted more natives. They also protect our natural resources, and they create habitats. I mean, do any of you have butterfly gardens? I mean, that's a wonderful thing to have in your yard because we need pollinators. So implementing these Florida-friendly practices will save you time, money, and energy, and it's also good for the environment. Next. So I'd like to talk a minute about what a native plant is. Now, this is an example of a native plant. I have this in my yard, and I actually purchased this at a regular nursery here, and didn't take a lot to find it. This is coral honeysuckle. It's a wonderful plant. It is not the Japanese honeysuckle that you might be familiar with, which has a lovely aroma. This does not, but it's beautiful, and it grows pretty much the whole year. Hummingbirds love it, and butterflies and bees love it. It's a wonderful plant. And it's considered native because it occurred here before the first Europeans came, as far as we know. Now, there are some plants that we consider naturalized because they probably came through wind or hurricanes or whatever, and they've taken place in Florida, and they've grown well, and they haven't interfered with the environment. But a non-native plant is actually considered an exotic plant. And those are plants that are introduced, and most of the plants that you see around here in the villages are exotics. Next. Invasive plants. I took a picture of this. This is a golden rain tree. It's blooming right now here in the villages. It's has a beautiful yellow bloom, and then that turns into its pink seed pods, which are beautiful, and they're all over the place. And I remember these when I was a child, but they have become extremely invasive. An invasive species is one that really disrupts the environment. And it also has a lot of consequences, not just to the environment, to the economy. It interferes with recreation. There's a lot of detriment to invasive plants. And we have about 150 invasive species in Florida, of plant species. Almost a third of all the endangered and threatened plants and animals are because of this. Next slide. I think most of you might be familiar with water hyacinths. That's one of the most famous invasive species. It's not just invasive to Florida, it's invasive to the entire world. I think it came over in a World's Fair many, many years ago, and somebody planted it in their yard, and it has spread everywhere. And it makes waterways unnavigable. You can't do recreation in it. It's cost hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars to get rid of. It's estimated that $100 million is spent each year. So if you're thinking of just the economics of this, it's incredible. And this was because somebody put this in their garden and it spread out into the wild. Another invasive is Brazilian pepper. Now up here we don't have quite as much of the problem, but you go a little farther south, Orlando and below, and Brazilian pepper is a tremendous problem. The reason is these plants don't have any natural enemies here, so they just grow and grow, and they take over where other plants should be, other plants that wildlife feeds on and needs. In Brevard County, they actually did a program of using goats to get rid of this Brazilian pepper, and the University of Florida has developed experimented with a natural enemy to the Brazilian pepper. This is actually related to pepper that you use on your food. And if you burn it or cut it, some people can be very sensitive to it. It can be very harmful. Beekeepers like it because their bees can feed on it, but I don't think the honey that it produces is very good. But it's infesting more than 700,000 acres now, and it just takes over everything, and it's incredibly hard to remove. Next. Okay, so now you know the basics. That, in Florida we have a lot of beautiful native plants. We have a lot of exotics that are okay, but many of them are very harmful and become invasive. Native plants can never be considered invasive. They can be aggressive. And there are some native plants that I would not recommend that you put in your home landscape because they can get very aggressive. But for the most part, they're not going to be harmful. Next. So why would you want to use native plants? Well, they're adapted. They're meant to be here. This is where they come from. They're great alternatives. They create a habitat. And as you can see, this is an award-winning landscape in the villages. And it's got a lot of native, it's mostly native plants. I think most of you are probably familiar with this. This is muhly grass. It's blooming right now. It's beautiful. They use it a lot in the villages. And it makes a great ground cover. Next. Now, all plants aren't created equal. I think, are any of you butterfly gardeners? Do any of you have butterfly gardens? That's a wonderful thing to have in your yard. We actually like to call them pollinator gardens. It's not just butterfly gardens. But many people are raising monarchs because monarchs are quite imperiled, and they're kind of the poster child for endangered insects. Their caterpillars eat only a special plant, and that's milkweed. Most butterflies lay their eggs on a certain plant, and that plant is the host plant for that particular species. So these butterflies eat, the caterpillars eat the native milkweed, or the milkweed, excuse me, and they turn into butterflies. Well, right now, there's a really big problem because there's not enough Florida native milkweed. It's, used to grow on roadsides. It's been eliminated, and it's hard to reproduce. But this particular milkweed, called Mexican milkweed or tropical milkweed, is very easy to reproduce. It's native to Mexico and Central America. It's not native here. And there's a disease that butterflies get. It's a very long name, but the initials are OE. It's a protozoa, that reproduces on the milkweed, and through time, over this season, it will produce more and more. Native milkweed dies down in the winter. It's natural form because butterflies aren't supposed to be here. Now, the monarchs that we get here in Central Florida are probably not the ones that are going to migrate to Mexico, but they're going to migrate farther south, so they shouldn't be sticking around here. You can see how cold it's gotten in the past few days. This is a little bit unusual. So the monarchs, but when this does not die down, so that OE builds up tremendously. There's also a little bit of a chemical composition of this plant that's different than our native milkweed, and they believe that that's a possibility that might be harmful. So when the butterflies, when the caterpillars ingest these from the milkweed plant, they might come out deformed. Their wings might not work. The caterpillar, the pupa might even die. Or if they come out, they're very small. Now our native milkweed also has this protozoa, but because it dies back, it's less likely to affect the monarch butterfly. Next. And our native milkweeds are beautiful. We have 21 species of them. In your home landscape, these would be the three that you most likely would have. There's butterfly weed, swamp milkweed, and aquatic milkweed. And even though the name says swamp milkweed, this doesn't have to grow in the swamp. It could grow fine in your yard. The aquatic needs a little more moisture, but if you had an area that was a little more moist, this works well. And again, this is the non-native. I was down in the Everglades last winter, and I saw this, and it was blooming. And I was asking the rangers down there, and they were very horrified that it was, because they don't want it there either. And I went to a nursery up here not too long after that, and I saw a bunch of this growing, and the guy had labeled it native milkweed. And I asked him about it, and I knew it was this milkweed because it was blooming, and I could tell by the flowers, because sometimes it's a little hard to distinguish these. And he's, oh no, it's native down south. And I said, well, excuse me, sir, it's not considered that. They're worried that this might cross with our native milkweeds. And if you've ever grown this in your yard, I've gone to people's yards and they say, well, it grew in places I really didn't want it because it spreads very fast. So it also can come in the yellow form, so don't be fooled. This is called silky gold, but it's still this species. Okay, next slide. Another plant that you see here in the villages is Mexican petunia. It's everywhere. And it might look good, but it's a very bad choice. It's a Category 1 invasive. I have seen this in fields just take over. Again, because it has no natural enemies, it takes over, it displaces our natural plants. There is a cultivar called Purple Showers, and there's actually some white versions and some pink versions that I've seen. But they can still be invasive because it spreads through rhizomes underground. And so that can be harmful. I know I have some in my yard from my neighbors because they said, oh no, it was the sterile cultivar. And then one thing about sterile cultivars, when they make plants that are sterile, a lot of times they can't reproduce. So they're not going to make pollen, and they might make very little nectar. So I notice sometimes I'll stop at a red light and I'll see the mediums that we have here in the villages, and I'll look down and I'll see bees or butterflies hovering around because they're attracted to the flowers. But there's not, it'd be like you going to a supermarket and you'd see all the lights and there's food in there, but the doors aren't open. So these plants do not have what our insects need. They're pretty, they're really pretty for us to look at, but is that only what we want? There is a plant called wild petunia, and it's beautiful. I have it in my yard. It grows in the wild. If you go on any hikes here in the villages, you might see it. And it's a wonderful to plant instead of this invasive Mexican petunia. By the way, if you go to Lowe's or a nursery and say, look, I really would like to plant this in my yard, they just might be receptive. I know I used to do the plant clinic at Lowe's, which we do twice a month, and I asked them to get some of the native milkweed in, and they did. They actually got some of the native milkweed in. So you might be able to find these readily. There are some native nurseries that I'm going to talk about in a minute, but you can ask and say, look, I want these native plants. Next. Another invasive plant is Nandina, heavenly bamboo. I remember as a child just thinking this is the most beautiful plant, but here it is extremely invasive. And these berries are toxic to some of our migratory birds. It can actually kill them. Cedar waxwings, they eat these. They tend not to want to eat them, but if food is scarce, they will, and they're toxic. And you see these everywhere in the villages. But there's examples of things you can plant, like weeping Yupon holly. Now this tree can get quite large, but it can be an alternative. And if it's the female, it will produce these berries. It's also a tea. If you go to Villages Grown, they actually have Yupon tea. It's got a caffeine in it, but supposedly it's a little milder than coffee. So this is an alternative that you can plant in your yard. Next. Another alternative is we have a problem with weeping bottlebrush. Now, all the bottle brushes are not a problem, but this one happens to be. And again, you have to kind of notice the scientific name to make sure that you're dealing with the plant. But because it's hard to tell the different species apart, you might want to just avoid it, period. Because there's a beautiful alternative, which is firebush. And I'm sure you've seen this. It grows a lot in the villages. It is a little cold sensitive to our zone, but it can die back in the winter, but it will come back. And hummingbirds love it, as do butterflies. It's just a wonderful plant. Next. And again, golden rain trees. I talked about it earlier. They're blooming right now. They're beautiful. But why we don't want to plant these. But chase tree is a lovely tree. It's native. It doesn't have the same color. It's a purple, but it's a wonderful tree to plant, and it's very similar. It doesn't get quite as big as the golden rain tree. There's some other alternatives. Sapphire showers is a great plant for butterflies. It's not native, but it is Florida friendly. Next. So if you want to conserve water, you might even think about reducing some of your lawn. We get people in the plant clinics all the time that have a patch of lawn that just, it the lawn just won't grow. Well, you might consider, now you have to be aware that before you do things like this, you might need to get them approved by the Architectural Review Committee. But you can put maybe a flower bed in there, or you could put a landscape bed. This is a wonderful plant, Kuntis. I'm sure you've seen them. They're all over the villages. They're native. They're actually a host plant to the Attila butterfly, except up here we're too cold to host that butterfly. But it's a wonderful plant, and it's a great landscape plant. Or you might create a situation like this where you have some shrubs and flowers, and they're native. They, by the way, have also, and this is not for this topic, but they have used this ground cover instead of grass. And these yards don't look terrible, and these are native. That's, again, a ground cover. That's not grass. Okay, next. So for resources for this, for one, in the back, we have some brochures that some of you can pick up. Again, it's a little hard to find some of these native plants, but you can go to the Florida Association of Native Nurseries. I know it's a little hard to be writing down these addresses, but you can Google this. It's FANN, F-A-N-N, and that's where you can find some native nurseries. We don't have any right here in the villages, but again, if you ask and inquire some of the nurseries that are local, they might start getting some of these plants. A good resource is the University of Florida. They have an app you can download for your phone, and it can show you what plants are, even if you just want to identify some plants. This is a great app to get. Again, the Villages chapter of the Florida Native Plant Society, we meet the fourth Friday of the month at 1 o'clock, and we meet at Big Cypress Rec Center. Our meeting's at 1:30, but we have a social hour, and we also have plants that we share there. And if you're interested on the invasive species, we do have a council that of the Florida invasive species, and they are the people who decide what is invasive after many years of research. And like I said, that changes all the time. Some plants might be not listed, but they're watching them because are these potentially going to be harmful? Next, I think that's it. Right? Yeah. So that's it. Does anyone have any questions on any of this?
Sal, you and Jerry want to...
Yeah. Okay, we have some questions.
Are there any nurseries in the area that specialize or that are recommended, that you would recommend to use for these plants?
There is, we don't have any really close, but there is one in Groveland. And you can get some information at the back table. Groveland is near Claremont, so it's a little ways. Now, the University of Florida has plant sales periodically. They actually have them weekly at the Butterfly Rainforest. That's about an hour away. And they don't have all natives, but they do sometimes have some natives. So that is the problem, is trying to find these plants.
Talk to the mic, please.
Okay. I have a fairly shady area that I'm having issues with. This milkweed, does it require a lot of sun, or will it thrive in it gets some sun, but it's mostly shady?
Well, milkweed does like sun, but that particular one, the one that was called aquatic milkweed, does like shadier areas. It will grow. It won't flower as much, and it won't grow. Most plants can sometimes get away not being in full sun. They just aren't going to grow as vigorously, and they might not flower as much. But yes, it can. Yes.
So twice a year there's a Master Gardener plant sale in Wildwood, and Florida Native Plants usually has a booth there where we sell natives. Also, if you come to our meeting, there's a raffle at the end where so you might win a plant. And don't we give away one ticket to somebody who comes to this meeting? Did we decide to do that? A raffle ticket? Anyway, come to the meeting.
Yes, that is a good way to obtain these native plants. So. Well, thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much. We have donuts and coffee in the back. Thank you all for coming, and we'll see you hopefully next month. Stay safe.